Hello, everyone. I'm Candice Delevante from Metamorphosis Pictures, and today I'm speaking with six-time national award-winning lawyer and educator Todd Belcore. He's received close to 24 honors, including the White House's Champion of Change. He's the executive director of the International Social Change Film Festival, also known as ChangeFest. Todd, welcome, and thank you for joining me today, taking time out of your busy schedule.
Great to be here, Director. Thank you for allowing me to join you and your audience.
Well, the reason why I want to have you on is because I, looked at your CV, and you have this wonderful, rich history, this trajectory, and I noticed that as I was reading it, you look at you're a policy wonk, as you call yourself. And you are, I want to get into that, but the reason why I really appreciate your work is because you look at issues from, with a very balanced point of view. You go to our elected officials and you affect change in terms of policy making. And then you also go to our communities and you say, here's where we can do better. Let's take a look at education, job opportunities, personal development, mental health, et cetera. So you really have a nice, well-rounded approach to your work.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate that. I'd like to focus on your policy work in this discussion as it relates to mass incarceration. We've been told that mass incarceration is necessary in order to keep America safe. What would you say is the greatest misconception about the current system?
The greatest misconception is exactly what you said, that mass incarceration as a tool actually keeps us safe, when it's very clear and all the data is clear. It's not even just conjecture, but it's irrefutable at this point, that mass incarceration makes us less safe. Not because incarceration in of itself is absolutely wrong, but the manner in which we incarcerate people is what's actually making people even worse. So whatever sort of issues people are enduring or trying to figure out how to navigate outside of bars, now they're forced to do that inside of bars, where it's a violent setting, where the setting doesn't care about their mental or physical or spiritual health. So they deal with even more obstruction, more obstacles to their personal development than they were experiencing on the outside. Oddly enough, there's a film that we're showcasing during our International Film Festival called Unguarded, which talks about this prison system in a part of Brazil where it's actually run by the community and the prisoners, and with the full intention of making sure that people are rehabilitated. We don't have that system here in America. So as a result, people come out more traumatized, more distressed, more distraught, and more likely to engage in the behavior that put them in prison in the first place. So that is the biggest misconception, that we have a justice system that has any justice literally in it. But it is a capacitation system, but that is not all the different tiers you need to have an effective system. And that's why at Social Change, and I work with other advocates and partners across the nation to make sure we are embedding justice in it, to make sure there are sentencing policies that make sense and can be adjusted according to the weight of the crime versus blanket policies that just kind of put everyone in one bucket. That's also why we ensure that there's educational opportunities on the grounds in prisons, and early release opportunities for people who are going above and beyond to show they turn their lives around. And that's why we argue clemency cases to get, all this kind of sealing and expungement, all these things that will kind of take some of these scarlet letters off people's backs, so they can have a chance to really turn their lives around and demonstrate that and do what they need to do for themselves, their families, and our communities.
Mm-hmm. You taught a course at Northwestern and the University of Chicago titled The New Jim Crow. Did teaching that course to your law students inform your future work on sentencing reform?
It was a byproduct of it. Seeing that in the front lines of doing advocacy work, there are a lot of people who care about these issues, but not a lot of people who have realized how easy it is to do the work that I do. So I'm trying to really demystify it. So I train not only community members and lawyers, but in the context of those classes, I was training law students to do everything it takes to really go to legislators, present issues as raw and truthful as they are, making sure we're really uplifting our common humanity, so people can really see that people are experiencing torture in prison, that people are experiencing just depraved conditions in prison. And as a result, we're getting depraved in torturous outcomes. So it's not only for the individual, you have to have some care, but if you're really going to honor the victim, responsible for the person going to prison in the first place, you make sure there aren't more victims. And right now, we don't have a system that's doing that. So training people just with the evolution of slavery laws to create the new Jim Crow, the way oppression has evolved and allowed itself to manifest into laws and structures that make it legal to discriminate against 80 million people legally, when it relates to housing, even voting, of course, getting jobs, starting businesses, getting loans, all the basic things you need to not just exist, but be truly free. And right now we're allowing a lot of people just kind of be and struggle and exist and, go underneath to the black market and go outside of the margins. And these are folks that we turn their back on. So it's important for me to make sure there are more soldiers in the field who are equipped with the skills and tools necessary to not only advocate in legislatures, but also provide the legal systems for the new remedies that we do enact. When we pass all these wonderful laws, they're only as good as our ability to enforce them. And there aren't enough people who have the capacity or interest. So we're doing everything we can to work on both.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you've trained over 1,000 attorneys, advocates, and community members about their civil rights and how to invoke them. Paint a picture for us, those of us who are on the outside looking in. Can you give us an example of someone who's committed an infraction and then suddenly found themselves facing jail time?
Yeah, especially in, I'm an older fella, so in the 90s and 2000s, things like that. I mean, especially the 80s, you're talking about things like marijuana being sufficient to evoke a felony charge. Something, of course, which is not only wildly legal, but wildly profitable in the legal market now. And that can cause anywhere from a 2 to 5 year sentence. It's like, well, okay, you put your head down, 2.5 years, but that's 2 years, trying to survive while incarcerated, physical violence, sexual violence, mental violence, and all the things that you're assailed with. And you come out a completely different person with severe trauma, PTSD, and it's harder for you to function and really do any of the things that you were able to do before. Add to that now every time you look for a job, a door slammed in your face. Every time you look for housing with a family member, otherwise you're told, no, everyone can stay here but you. That adds to the level of trauma that people are enduring, and it adds up. It really is death by a million cuts. So people wonder why people get frustrated and kind of revert to the black market. It's the only economy that's available to them. It's the only job available to them. And people aren't going to sit by and watch their elders, their mother, their loved ones, their children go hungry while they're still able-bodied and able to do something. So that's a really kind of quick snapshot of the cycle. Even for something not even heinous, very minor, something that's celebrated now, that's something that people are still saddled with even now. I just argued a clemency case on Monday, or a case that's more severe in terms of how it's written. It was aggravated battery against a police officer. But if you actually dig into the facts of the case, I mean, it's a gentleman, soaking wet, is 145 pounds. He is with a group of friends, and they're all very clearly passive and nonviolent. And when you get pulled out of a car and roughhoused, and you don't know what's going on, you're disoriented, you're scared, so you try to run, you resist, and that was a time period where police officers, whatever they said, went. So if they said you hit them, and they say you hurt them, that's what was written down, and that's what you were charged with. And this gentleman, almost 20 years ago, was charged with that. So even in the context of the clemency proposal, and I argued it before the Prison Review Board, they said openly that they just couldn't imagine a situation when he did the things that they said he had done. So that's also why it's not only engaging in making sure people in prison have more opportunities, or making sure that sentencing reform makes sense, to make sure people are even arrested in the first place, making sure police are held accountable in the first place, making sure that there's some real integrity in the position, and not that there isn't already, but making sure it's ubiquitous. Make sure there aren't the bad cops who are getting away with beating people up, taking their stuff, and then charging the person as if the other person assaulted them. So that's all the things that we're mindful about. Every layer of the system has a serious need for reform, and that's why we engage in reform on so many levels of social change.
With regard to the Liberty Project, you've been working to bring about, you've assisted or led to pass 30 laws. Maybe it's more by now. in multiple states related to policing and prison reform. I want to focus on two of them. A bail reform measure, which is abolishing jail time for unpaid parking tickets.
Yeah.
And a police reform measure, alternatives to deadly force. Can you speak to these two measures and the impact that they created?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's hard to believe, and you know laws are backwards when you explain them to your family members, even who may be Republican or maybe Democrat or maybe independent, like libertarian, doesn't matter. They're shocked to find that people are actually incarcerated because they haven't paid parking tickets. Because what happens is we can't pay parking tickets for a period of time. Generally, the next level of kind of hammer to induce, payment is to take someone's driving privileges. But just because you take my driver's privileges doesn't mean I stop needing to drive. Doesn't mean I stop needing to take my child to daycare. Doesn't mean I need to stop going to work. Doesn't mean I need to stop going to doctor's appointments. Doesn't mean I need to stop, taking my mom to and from the grocery store. Your life still goes on. So someone who is poor and already unable to pay in the first place, you want to take their only means of acquiring income, and then on top of it, you want to make everything they do to survive day to day illegal. So eventually, especially in structures where communities are hyper policed, people are pulled over all the time over things that are non-existent or even minor, and that comes up, and they're arrested, and of course they're put in jail and prison as a result. So we had to do something about that. So we created a pathway by which, basically, instead of taking someone's license in the first place, that they had more bites at the apple, if you will, in terms of opportunities to pay before the license was even suspended in the first place. So even if it was suspended, it would be a special status. So they would get a ticket for driving on, but they weren't arrested. And that's a huge difference in the lives of people. Of course, that doesn't mean that it makes it all entirely non-illegal, but this is what compromise looks like when you're dealing with state's attorney's offices, police departments, sheriff's departments, and things like that. And it is a huge win for the people in our community, my community, who are just trying to function and survive in an inflated economy where jobs are fewer and far between. They pay less, they have fewer benefits. A $50 ticket, a $100 ticket can be the difference between whether you can put gas in your tank and take your child to daycare or pay a ticket for overstaying a meter by 5 minutes. So it's recognizing the kind of inhumanity embedded in those existing laws and doing something about them. So that's for the, making it illegal to drive parking tickets. That's kind of that part of it. The second part, as you mentioned, was about bail.
Alternatives to deadly force.
Alternatives.
And if you would reference the city that you're from, in just so to give perspective.
Thank you. So the second part of your question was actually about police and the use of force. And I'm in Chicago, which is kind of the false confession capital of the world, and where it's ground zero for a lot of issues and not good issues. Police brutality being one of them. So it was really important for us recognizing the issues that aren't just happening nationally, but have been happening in Chicago since its founding, of police taking liberties and beating people with impunity, but also without justification. So we did to make sure, at the very least, that we change the standard by which you're allowed to use force to first focus on preserving life and making it so that the justifications necessary can't be as vague and amorphous as they've been. I mean, people have to have a weapon. They have to be able to demonstrate not only that the person is fleeing, but that person is fleeing and they have no way to ever contact them again, and they have reason to believe that by their fleeing, they're also going to commit another deadly crime. Because what's happening now, a lot of people are just pulled over, terrified, because everything they see what everyone else sees about police beating people, police killing people. So when you think someone's trying to kill you, you don't stick around and see what's going to happen. You run.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and that's, of course, not what we train people to do in the context of how we say, how to deal with police and bring cases and things like that. But that being said, it is a natural reaction. So we need to make sure the laws allow for that, not so people can just abscond from the police whenever they feel, with no regard for authority, but to ensure that even when people are terrified and do run, that they're not shot in the back as they run, and they're not beaten down as a result, and things like that, recognizing what's really going on in our communities. So we did make sure there's an alternative use of force for that. But we also made sure that when police do chronicle what's happening, we hold them accountable for misrepresenting what's happening on police reports. So it won't be like what just happened with the gentleman's case I mentioned earlier with clemency, where it was a complete mischaracterization of all the things that actually happened on that given night, such that it makes this person look like an absolutely violent human being who's as docile and peaceful and kind as you'll ever meet. Those are the sorts of things that need to be done. It's not only to make sure that people are being mistreated, but also so people can trust the police department more. I have 3 family members that are police officers in my immediate family. So it's important to me that when they do things, that they're not being spit on and cussed out and targeted and advance that threat of losing their lives simply for choosing an occupation that is designed and written to help people, and they actually go out of their way to do so. But as long as the impression is and the reputation is that they're going to cause harm and do harm, that puts them in harm's way even more so than they need to be. So everything we're doing is not only to protect community members that have also been a victim of police brutality, but it's also to make sure that people who are going to work and doing their jobs aren't subject to brutalization necessarily either.
I read a blurb in the chicagobarfoundation.org website, and your mother inspired you to use your opportunities to serve others, including your brother. Can you speak to that briefly?
Oh, wow. That's a real deep dive. I know one time I received an award, and they asked who did I want to introduce me. And I made the mistake of saying my mom. I said the mistake because, for people who know me for longer than a few seconds, she is everything to me. And then she started talking about my brother. She wouldn't let me see the speech before she did it. So she introduced me, and she was talking about just really through his eyes, my growth and my empathy and the way I've always served and fought for people who weren't really equipped to fight for themselves. My brother being a paraplegic, my older brother, and when I was younger, the little one, I would help bring food and things. And then as I got older, I built a ramp so we can get to and from places, kind of help navigate the world. And as I got older, then I was old enough to lift him and carry him and take him places. And to her, that was just the way in which I grew in my service. Like the stronger, the more able I became to do more, the more I did. And then that was a direct outgrowth of what I saw her doing. My whole life, I saw her sacrificing and working and going above and beyond, and blood, sweat, and tears, so her and her 4 kids could have a chance to succeed. So the way she fought for us is the way I wanted to fight for others. So that's what inspired me to do all the work we're doing. My brother in particular has shown me that even in a world where you're dealing with this incredible disability, and this is an era where disability advocacy was much less powerful. So you couldn't get on buses the same way, you couldn't get a majority of buildings the same way. The entire society is structured to make it impossible for you to navigate. He was still so happy, so joyful, so proud, so kind, so loving. So that taught me a lot as well. We all grew up poor, we were in the same household. But the way he approached life was just one of sheer joy and gratefulness. And that's something I think that's also stuck with me, an influence I just had on me throughout my entire life.
Wonderful. Let's pivot and talk about ChangeFest this year. Can you give us, because we're going to be posting a few links for those who are watching, to direct them to the Liberty Project and ChangeFest. Can you talk about what it means? What is it?
Yes. ChangeFest. Thank you for the pivot. Something that makes me a little less emotional. Change, my family's everything to me, so thank you for bearing with me as I kind of struggle through that. But ChangeFest is a really exciting experience. It's actually, the experience responsible for me being lucky enough to meet Director Delevante in the first place. And it's virtual and in person, so we recognize and honor the fact that the pandemic has taken over 1 million lives, and people are still living in terror, and we're nervous about contracting this illness. We understand that. So for you, it's Netflix from your house. It's Netflix for social change films. You get to watch any of the films we have available. We have over 150 this year. We received thousands of hours of content, so 150 is way more than we wanted, but every film was so amazing and required our attention and really to argue for it to remain in the festival. So, so we have everything kind of chronicled according to subject matters, but also any other taggable or important matters. So, Black directors, female directors, criminal justice, mental health. You put it in the subject matter and it'll just kind of pop up and filter the films accordingly. Or you can just scroll through, just kind of swipe through like you were doing if it was Netflix or anything else, and just get your ticket and you go. And some of the proceeds go to the issues that are addressed in the film. So that's one way to enjoy it. You can check that out, ChangeFest2022.eventive.org. But there'll also be opportunities virtually to take part in conversations relating to the issues in the films. As Director Delevante knows, we don't just want to show films, we want to make sure your inspiration is captured, further bolstered through talkback education with the directors, people directly impacted, advocates, expert practitioners in the space. And then we want to have that all segue into some opportunity to get involved. So please check it out, whether it's virtually or in person. If you are comfortable being in person, you're tired of being in the house, you want to meet some amazing people who celebrate our common humanity, yes, do that virtually, do that online, but you can also do that in person in Atlanta, Chicago, and LA. A lot of our people who are in New York, unfortunately, so impacted by COVID, they had to move. So that's why we're not in NYC. And I haven't been in NYC as much because we're doing so much of our advocacy work now in 8 capitals across the nation.
Wow.
So, yeah, we've really grown significantly.
Wow.
So it's made it hard for me to get to one of my favorite cities, NY. So even though we'll be in New Jersey next week, I know that's not the same. So I'm not going to claim that.
You're being used in a mighty way. Todd, thank you so much. Wonderful.
I really
Pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Good.
All right. Bye, everyone.